Hello and welcome to an Everyday Canines video. In this video I want to talk to you a bit about terminology for the Seesaw and also some very important safety factors. So the word you have for your Seesaw is entirely up to you. I used to originally say Seesaw, I now say CCC. It's very different from any of my other words, and so the dog knows that it's CCC, it means Seesaw. Now some people have the same word for all their contact equipment. It could be run, it could be up. I don't, because I can see situations arising, certainly where you could have, say, a dog walk and a Seesaw together, and if you're not able to position yourself in a way that makes it obvious which one you want, then your dog could say, I don't know which one you want to take, and I'll take whatever is handy, and it could be the wrong one. So I have different words. Another thing with the Seesaw is I want my dog to know they're doing the Seesaw. A big problem you'll see with baby dogs, and I think most of us have had it at some point, is they have trouble working out when they're doing a dog walk and when they're doing a Seesaw. If you look this angle, now we have our Seesaw, and you imagine there was a dog walk right beside, this part would look identical to the dog walk up plank. The only difference being that this has got an extra contact. And you see it time and time again that the dogs, young dogs, they come to the Seesaw and they think it's the dog walk. So they rush up and then either they fly off or they suddenly realise it's moving, they panic a little bit, they get over it, they get down, but then they go, oh, I'm not sure now. And then they come to a dog walk next and they go, oh, I don't know, I don't like this dog walk, it might move. So that's very important that our dogs understand the difference between a Seesaw and a dog walk so that we don't have this constant confusion with them not knowing what they're doing. Because it deflates their confidence, and it could be a safety risk, an injury risk, if they don't understand that one's going to move and one doesn't. So for my Seesaw, I have CCC, which means come up onto the Seesaw. But I also have an additional word, which is bang. Bang means I want you to stop at this end, lay down, in Swift's case. I should add I haven't got this for Sparrow. Slow down and ride this down. By saying the extra word bang, as the dog's getting up to about, say, here, I'm reinforcing to the dog that this is not a dog walk. So I wouldn't say that on a dog walk. You would say, if I had a dog walk, I have couple of words for dog walks. I have run, which means power over that dog walk. And then if I want them to do something complicated at the end, like a turn, and I want them to be a little bit more controlled, then I say feet and then whatever I want them to do at the end of the dog walk. So it might be feet right, say. So, but I would never say right or any word as they're coming up the up plank. They'd only get that word as they were heading towards the down. So my point is that by adding in that bang, it helps to additionally help them to understand what they're doing. That being said, sometimes the bang word for me means lay down there until I release you. We don't always want that. Sometimes we might say, I want my dog to just keep powering on. I don't want it holding a position till I say, in which case you might just use CC without the bang. Can do that. Most dogs get so conditioned to laying down on the Seesaw at bang that they do it even when you don't say it eventually, because they do learn the difference. They eventually learn the difference in the words. But it's very important to help your dog along with that. So that's why I don't have just one word, I do have that extra word to assist them. In terms of handling terminology relating to a Seesaw, mostly, as I said, we talked about the fact that mostly Seesaws they should be a straight entry. So you're not looking at terribly fussy handling at the entry. At the end, you're going to be looking at all the traditional handling, your blinds, your front crosses, the same as what we've talked about before. They might happen at the end. You're also going to have perhaps times when the dog turns off the contact. So that's going to happen there. But there isn't a vast amount of different words for the Seesaw, because a bit like weaves, there is one behaviour you expect of the dog. You run up, you take a position on the contact, you hold yourself on the contact until it lands down, and then you either self-release, so Sparrow self-releases, or you wait until I tell you to release. So Swift should technically wait until I say go. Some important safety aspects for the handler and the dog. This object is moving, and when that end is flicking and that end's coming up, or vice versa, there's a lot of weight and power coming up there and potential injury. One of the things I used to do when I was first training, and I never even questioned it, I would ask my dog to go up the seesaw and I would cross behind. I will still do that. However, and it was pointed out to me by someone, and they made very good sense, that it is a dangerous manoeuvre, because if you mistime that rear cross, then I have seen videos of this, then the seesaw may flick up, catch the handler in the legs, or worse, and take them down and injure them. Obviously, also, if you're doing that, potentially you could get your dog throw off. So when you're doing a rear cross on a seesaw, if you're going to do that, it needs to be spacious rear cross. So I wouldn't do a rear cross right here. This would be a danger zone. I want to be further back so that even if I mistime things and the seesaw's going up, I'm hopefully not going to be running straight into it. I mean, if we look at this end, you think how close it is to the chest and neck. Obviously, if you were slightly shorter, it would be face height. You've got to be aware that you could run into this and you could hurt yourself. Things to bear in mind. Another thing to bear in mind is on the opposite end. This is more of a dog safety thing, though I have seen it go wrong with the handlers. It's when people are trying to do a blind, say, at the seesaw. They're doing a blind. It could be that they trip over the end because they really missed out. Mind you, if you were doing your blind and this was already on the ground, that would be a serious error in judgment because you're going to be stepping on your dog. So the main safety factor here is that when you're doing a blind like this and your dog's coming down, it's not so bad if they got stopped, because to be honest, with a stopped, you've got the time they should be waiting there. But if your dog is going to self-release, you mistime that dog's going to run straight into you. Into the back of your legs is going to be a collision. So again, it's a place where you want it to be a distance blind. You don't want to be right on top of your dog. You've got to be a bit sensible on those factors. Other safety features and things to think about is the very fact that because this is moving, we've got the problem that if our dog does not take this correctly, they are going to be putting a lot of force through their body in the wrong places. That's one, so they could injure themselves. Secondly, they could get thrown off. I had a lot of trouble when Swift was first starting. Swift is a light dog. She's about 7 kilos. When we were first starting out with Swift, she got multiple times, she got flung off the side. It wasn't as she was riding it, it was as, if you imagine then, as the end hit, there's a reverberation. It bounces. It doesn't just go straight down. And it would hit and she'd just get flung off the side. It's obviously a problem. It was reducing her confidence. So I had to look at how I'm training the Seesaw to correct that. Now, with Sparrow, a slightly heavier set dog, I always allowed her to just get on with her own thing, come here. She usually adjusted or she was straight up and she was fine. Because Swift was lighter, I had to adjust so that Swift was getting into a position, in that case, a down, because by going into the down, she could hold that position better and she wasn't being flung off. So that was a project we did last summer, actually, teaching her, you come in, you go down, and you are then safe to ride that down. As they get a bit more confident, what can actually happen is they don't do a complete down. What they do is they do a bow. It's still actually quite nice. They're still, though they're perhaps not doing a complete down, they might not do a complete down until the plank hits the ground. What they are actually doing is they are adjusting their weight. They are in a nice flat position so they're not going to get flung off. We don't want our dogs standing upright, because if the dogs are standing upright, that's when they can get flung off. Even big dogs, I've seen big dogs who are trying to do this in a stand, they can get flung off. The other thing to bear in mind is we want our dogs to weight shift back as this is tipping, so that we're not putting all the pressure from the bank, because this is going to hit the ground. We're not putting all that pressure up through their shoulders and neck. I mean, you think about this, when this is hitting the ground, you've got you could have a 30 kilo dog on here if it's a big dog, and you're hitting down into the ground fast, and that force, not so much on the wood because that does have a softening effect, but on aluminium, that's going to go straight up into the dog, risking injury. So what we actually want the dog to do is we want them to lean back slightly so they're braced, if you like. They're braced so that as they go down, the force is spread, it's not going to be so impactful. Same applies when I'm training a Seesaw, I don't overtrain it. because again, lots of repetitions of this, you are putting that impact through the body. I probably only ever train my Seesaw once a week, and I limit how many times I do the repetitions of it because I want to be careful of that. Obviously there are sort of little mini training games you can do with a Seesaw that don't require them to do a full one and get all that impact bang, but when I'm doing a full Seesaw training, once a week is fine, just a few repetitions, once my dog knows what it's doing. So we talked about weight shift, we've talked about making sure the dog can hold this position as it goes down. It's important to note that the plank should touch the ground before your dog leaves it. This is important for competition because you'll get faulted if it doesn't, but it's also again a safety factor. I'm going to show you this end because it's lower. So as your dog's coming down, if they jump off now, where it's up, because they've removed their weight, the Seesaw, because it's naturally counterbalanced and should return to position, will start to go up. There is a risk, therefore, as your dog is coming off, that the Seesaw will flick up and get them. I've had that happen where a dog actually got flicked up its backside. So if you imagine it's here, the dog's here, now it comes off and the Seesaw wants to come back up. So it can potentially obviously cause an injury to the dog or just spook the dog. Hey gorgeous. And worry them. But yeah, you don't want that. So we want to make sure that the Seesaw is completely down and touching the ground. Secondly, it's important that our dog leaves the Seesaw correctly and carries on and doesn't attempt to go back on the Seesaw or hang around at the end. So we want them to make sure when we're asking our dog to leave, we want them to get on with it. We don't want them just stepping off because again, the Seesaw starts to come back up, could hit them. So we want something like that where she's just gone off. We don't want them hanging around there. Sometimes people who've got stop contacts, they teach the dog that if the dog misses the contact to put its foot back on the contact. Not terribly great in training because actually it would, in competition, that would actually be an elimination because the dog has completed the obstacle and then went back on it. So I don't do that, but if you do that, or people do that, what can then happen is the dog comes off, dog goes, oh, I missed the contact, I'm supposed to be stopped there. The Seesaw's already going back up. When they try to put their leg back on it, again, you can imagine that they can get knocked, injuries, blah, blah. Another thing to bear in mind, and this comes down to training, and this is why I say have those two words, is because what you see, and I think very few baby dogs don't do this at some point, but something to bear in mind is that the dog runs up, and because it thinks it's a dog walk and it doesn't slow down and stop, they just fly off the end. Hate seeing that, hate it. I hate it when mine have done it. So I work very hard to avoid that. That's why you have your bang cue or some other cue to teach your dog, you're going to stop there, do not carry on running straight in a straight line. It does happen there. So be aware that can happen. Be conscious if it does. Your dog may need a little bit of tweaking from their physio if they've flung themselves off from a height. But those are your main safety factors. One other thing in training, not so much in competition, but certainly in training, do be aware if you've got multiple dogs around or you're working with your dog, make sure no other dog gets under the Seesaw when it's going down or whichever way you're doing. Make sure you know there's nothing on there. Same if the dog, you're working with a dog and they get off suddenly, make sure you're around to stop the Seesaw either coming down on them or flicking up on them. You've just got to be aware of those factors when you're initially training this, certainly, that doesn't happen. You've got to be very cautious and also be careful any helpers you've got around you. You don't want to flick them in the chin and give them a bit of a concussion. Probably should also mention at this point about noise sensitivity. The bang of the Seesaw causes a lot of dogs a lot of worries, and it is something you have to work through, but that's a training issue. So if your dog is nervous of the Seesaw because of the bang, it's something to do with conditioning exercise, but it's part and parcel of these things. So that is your terminology and your safety for your Seesaw. It is probably one of the, I don't want to say more dangerous items in the agility course because that sounds like it is dangerous. It's not. We try to make agility as safe as possible, but you've got to bear in mind that occasionally that there are risks involved with Seesaw. So, it's something to be very sensible about. I hope you've enjoyed this Everyday Canines video, and if you have, you might like to check us out on YouTube and subscribe, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And I hope to see you all again very, very soon.